Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. I'm your host, James Gardner, certified athletic therapist, certified strength and conditioning specialist, yoga instructor, human being. This platform, for the pros, by the pros, anybody in the performance space, and beyond. Welcome here to share in the stories of professionals, experiences, journeys, learning along the way. It's a platform to connect, to network, and to be a part of a community that cares, with conversations that matter, experiences that resonate, and generate ideas, thought-provoking, organic dialogue, passionate pros. Brought to you as always by First Star Therapy, Mobility Tape, Epic, and Benchmark Athletics, in association with the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association. It's First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Thanks for being here. Thank you for being a part of it. Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy roundtable brought to you by First Star Therapy. I'm your host, James Gardner, and this is a platform for the pros, by the pros. Passionate pros, organic dialogue. Let's chat. Thanks for listening. Let's roll. Session 75. It's been a long time coming, a reschedule on my end, and Chris Towe is here with our guest, as our guest tonight on Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Before we get to that, just want to touch in on one big thing in our world as athletic therapists. It is Athletic Therapy Month being June 1st. So a happy Athletic Therapy Month to all of those out there as ATs or involved with ATs or learning about AT or anything to do with the athletic therapy world and the performance space. We've been at this over a year now in terms of this podcast, and what a ride it's been. We'll be hosting a table Wednesday night at the first ever virtual CATA social and awards night. It's Tuesday, so that means that's tomorrow. A little bit of housekeeping here, but as always, this podcast is brought to you by First Star Therapy, Mobility Tape, Epic, and Benchmark Athletics. Again, session 75 with Chris Towe. Originally from Caledon, Ontario, he played 3 seasons from 2014 to 2017 for the Alberta Golden Bears, winning the Canada West and U Sports titles, 3 medals along the way, and the national title in 2014-15, and then on to the University of Toronto, where he competed for the national title for the first time in a long time for that university. And we'll get his story and his contributions and what that meant along the way as well. Competing internationally for the past 6 years in beach volleyball. Chris is now part of the NextGen program with Volleyball Canada. In 2020, he earned second team All-Canadian honors for the first time in his career. He ranked second on the University of Toronto Blues and 8th in the province with 3.21 kills per set. Helped U of T to an OUA silver medal finish, their best placing since the 2003-04 season. Always jacked up to talk with athletes and get their take and their stories and their past. Chris, really appreciate you carving the time in and rescheduling a couple times and, going through that traumatic loss last night with the Leafs, but really appreciate you making the time and getting on here with us to have this chat.
No, I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to it. So we had to reschedule to watch the Leafs, but we're here and I'm excited.
Yeah, either way it went, we were rescheduling to watch it. Since our initial talk, listen, I think like all the accolades and the medals and stuff like that, I'd love to touch on. But this being an athletic therapy based podcast, those relationships, the dynamics with therapists and performance personnel and teammates and coaches, your personal stories of injury, recovery, doing it yourself on the road, doing it with a team behind you or not at certain times in the team environment. All of these pieces going to be a part of our learning experience together in this, not just mine, not just yours, but ours. And then the advocacy piece really jumped out when you and I first talked. Stepping back from all the things that you've accomplished and all the things that you've been through, and giving back to younger athletes to sort of showcase what it means to be independent, what it means to advocate for yourself in the athletic space. Without leading you anywhere, where did volleyball start? I guess let's go there and just see where this conversation goes. Where did the interest start? You're obviously a whole lot taller than I am, even on camera here and sitting down. Where did it start? How did it end up where it is? And then we'll jump down all of the experience along the way.
Yeah, for sure. So, coming from a tall family, dad's 6'5", mom's 6'1". My brother and I are both 6'6", and as much as my dad wanted to put us in hockey, we were tall, skinny guys, so he felt like we'd be better suited for a tall man sport. So we were put in basketball for the youth age sports, and we played for about 6 years, and up until about 13, played basketball pretty competitively for some top teams, and just we knew, both of us and me especially, I knew I wanted to be a pro athlete, and I thought for a while it was basketball. I loved it, but the passion started to fade, but my passion for sports didn't. So I said, okay, like what can I maybe pivot my passion to? And I just tried out for the school volleyball team in high school. And I had a buddy on the team. He said, why don't you come out and try out for the local rep team? And I did, and loved it the first year. I loved the team, atmosphere. You can't win a volleyball game by yourself. 6 guys in the court. You can only touch it once per rally. So that took away one guy hogging the ball the whole game and just taking shots for the team. and I was like, hey, okay, so I'm tall. This is a good sport for me. I'm, skinny, but I can jump, and this is also useful. So spent a couple years learning, and then progress developed very quickly. Started getting a lot better, joined a different team, and took the youth division all the way to the national final, where we got national silver in my 17U year, and then didn't quite make it there in 18U, but because how well we did in 17U, got notice from the University of Alberta as we competed in Edmonton that year. So the coach came up to me after the game and said, hey, would you like to join our team? And I hadn't thought much about university sports at the time. I didn't know much about the league, who was good, who wasn't. So I said, hey, I appreciate the offer. I'll look into it. And turns out they won the youth sports national title the year before, and they were the best team in the country. So I said, I'd love to join. And the following year moved out to Edmonton and started my first year out in Alberta. So that was my first season as a university athlete, and it was a huge jump because I had guys, current Olympians or current Olympic hopefuls on Team Canada that were all on the team with me at the time, and it was going from, okay, I might be the best player in my 18U team, and now I'm the smallest and the worst player on this team of men. And how can I fit into that role? How can I crack that lineup of such a deep team? And it was a totally different atmosphere, but loved being out there. Spent 3 years there and was a crucial part of the team, and unfortunately sustained a lot of injuries, which is why I'm love talking to James earlier, because we shared a lot of things about my relationships with athletic therapists, dealing with injuries, how different coaches deal with it, how different therapists deal with it, and how I learned to deal with it from a kid who hadn't had any experience with injury or therapy or recovery, rehab, anything like that, to learning quite a bit about it and but what I wish I would have done younger. I spent a lot of time. I hurt my shoulder, so I have a labrum tear in my shoulder from all the overhead swings in volleyball, and I also have 2 herniated discs in my back and two torn labrums in my hips. So on paper, I'm a broken mess, but I'm still here. I'm fully jumping. I'm playing hard, and I've managed to keep going just through what I've learned. But yeah, it's to start with the piece where, as a young guy, is just getting injured, right? You're on a high performance team, and it was difficult because I'm injured and I don't have a starting spot yet, and I'm very close. I'm about to crack the lineup. I'm getting asked to travel. I'm getting put in games for a little bit at a time, and I have these nagging injuries that aren't taking me out of the game. I don't have a broken leg. I don't have a torn ACL. It's not something that's going to completely stop me from the game, but each day I play on it, it's getting so much worse. So it's like a mental battle. Do I go to the trainer? Do I not? I know if I go to the trainer, I might not get to play. If they take me out, I might not get to play. I'm worried about how long do I get to miss practice for. So it's kind of one of those things that I just keep internal at the time, and to the point where I have to pull myself out of practice because I can't lift my arm. And
I think like there's so much to get into with that. You've touched on it. You're not alone in that, but it's your experience and you're the expert in it. And that's where like having these conversations with athletes, I get so excited to have these, not to discuss your injuries or to identify injuries, but to navigate that through your eyes, and how our language or our perception of your injury, or our perception of your your experience of the pain, or your ability or inability to focus or concentrate or deliver. It's interesting because in swinging back to your story, like this is a rapid escalation of tall, skinny guy who can jump into playing with men who are competing for Olympic spots. And I guess my first question, just coming back to that before we get into any of the injuries, is how did you at the time, or is it in reflecting back, how did you identify this as an opportunity to learn versus an overwhelming environment that you didn't fit in? You know what I'm saying? Like you're a young guy coming in and you're sort of overwhelmed when you walk into that room, and there's some, now you're the smallest and not the most talented in the room, coming from big fish, small pond, transitioning over. So a lot of questions we can ask as we transition from sort of, high caliber team to high caliber national winning team at the university level. I'd love to get into sort of like schedule and training differences, because I think that's a big one to highlight. But did you at the time identify this as an opportunity to take you a couple years to see this as, oh, wow, like I can learn here? Or was it more like I got to hide in the corner and hopefully not mess up?
I think it was a bit of both of those points. My biggest way of learning volleyball at the time is, growing up, there wasn't pro volleyball on TV. You can't go watch it. I didn't really know much about Ontario University volleyball. So the way I learned was watching highlights and pro matches and old Olympic matches on YouTube. And I always learned from watching, because I, know how I do things, and I could see these guys, okay, they're scoring this way. They're moving their bodies this way. And I think that's how I picked it up. And I felt my progression from the age of 14 to 18. I tripled that within, I'd say, 1 month playing with these guys. Because every day, like, they're battling and I'm just learning. I'm watching the guys that play my position, but they're in their 5th year. And I'm saying, wow, okay, like, instead of just being scared and nervous, I'm just analyzing them. How are they doing this? What are they doing differently? Like, how far away are they jumping? In different situations, what decisions are they making? How are they carrying themselves on the court was another huge one.
Yeah.
They were loud. Yeah. They were confident. They're yelling at each other, not negatively, but there's everything that's going on. They're calling it out. And as a shy kid from the country, that was a hard one for me at first. My coach always was on me, like, Chris, you got to speak up. You got to talk. You're a mouse. And it's hard because you're out there and all these older guys are yelling, going crazy. And if you don't dive for a ball, they're like, "Well, what are you doing?" And expect so much, but it forces you to learn quickly, or else you get weeded out. And that's kind of what happened with a lot of guys. Is we took 24 guys and 6 guys on the floor. So out there every year, they might take a bunch of rookies, but 1 or 2 make it past first, second year because they just weed them out. And I think the ones who survive are the ones who say, okay, I take this challenge on. I'm going to go out of my comfort zone, be loud, really learn from these guys, ask questions, try to become their friends rather than be scared. And I think that's why I was so successful.
Yeah, all great points. And from the eyes and the experience of being there and living it, you touched on a couple other things that I'd love to get to as well. And that's sort of this internal struggle of, do I say something or not? And then the external perception of, when I say something, it has to be perceived and then received by the therapist or the coaching staff or the others that you're training with or competing with, but also against for a spot. And so, like, injury as weakness or injury as something that's holding you back, you're banged up along the way when you play a repetitive sport. There's going to be chronicity in the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, the ankles, whatever the case might be. but admitting to that as sort of like, this is something that we need to take care of and take care of regularly, as opposed to reacting to when it's too late. I think that's a big one. And I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but how long did it take you to sort of say like, okay, hands up, like I need some assistance with this, to feel comfortable to say that? And is that a matter of, I'd imagine it's partly each individual, but at the same time, the mentality of the performance personnel, the therapists that are there, the coaching staff, and how that's received along the way. I'll let you sort of feel that in whatever manner you wish, but that internal, how do you get to a point where you can say, listen, I'm not hurt, but I need some help, or I'm really hurt and I can't go?
Yeah, so I experienced that dilemma from two completely different standpoints at the different universities. Because at Alberta, I was a small fish, huge pond, top team, and I was more, there's a lot of pressure from, I think, the coaching staff to kind of keep guys at practice, unless you had to go out. You know, you were expected to be there. If you were sick, you're expected to be there unless you're really, really sick. And as a young guy, you don't want to get on the coach's bad side because you're looking to get on the floor.
Right.
So I think depending on your like relationship with the coach, if there's a lot of pressure of, hey, like you're not missing practice, and even if they don't say it, they imply there's a playtime consequence, practice time consequence, or something is at stake. It's very hard to pull yourself out and be honest with the trainer. Luckily, in that situation, I had a very good trainer, and he was a therapist, and he very approachable, very trustworthy. You could trust that the things you'd said to him were confidential, and he was a huge reason I even made it through what I did out there, because I didn't know much about working out. So a lot of my issue was I wasn't very strong. I never worked out in high school, never had a program. We didn't really have a forced program at the time because we were winning every game, and our coach didn't see a point in us working out, which is another point I might touch on later. But
Absolutely.
So at the time I was weak, jumping hundreds of times, getting hurt. And it was great because the relationship with the therapist at the time was approachable. Tell me anything. Hey, like we'll work through it. We know the coach dynamic and we'll try to approach that the best way possible. So that was great because I could go to him and say, hey, like I'm hurt. This hurts. What can we do? And he would, try to manage it after practice, before, go see him during the day, and understood that there's a lot of pressure from the coaching staff. But I think that's such a hard thing, is when you have this pressure over your head of, hey, like, even though you're hurt, instead of taking care of it, and you might miss a couple of practices and then you get back to 100%, a lot of the younger athletes think, oh, if I miss these practices, I might not get the chance to play again. So I'll keep myself in. And doing that, you're risking just making this problem, which might go away in a week or a few days, just linger for years. So that was the one side. And then the other perspective I saw when I was at U of T, I was the oldest guy. I was the most experienced guy. So I wasn't afraid to ever go to them with problems. But it was more so a dynamic where I wasn't taken seriously because it had so many injuries of the past. It was almost seen as there's no way it's possible for this like guy to be hurt. He's just like a baby. Don't listen to him. The coach might have a relationship with the trainer where they almost try to like just give it a little massage, put you back on the floor, like try to convince us that we're fine. So that was a different situation where I wasn't afraid to say, hey, I'm not practicing, or hey, I need treatment, and I'd go to get the treatment, and it was almost them trying to convince me that I'm okay. And that just goes to
it's sorry, man. It's that fine line, right? And like, it's awesome to hear you be as open with this as you are, because from a therapy standpoint, we walk these lines, but we also sometimes neglect the fact that you're walking the same lines, on the other side as the athlete. And I love that first point of with when you're out at Alberta, of the therapist or the training staff having the relationship with the coach and them massaging that, where it's not you and the coach or you against the coach. It's your body working with the medical personnel, and then them delivering that information with and to and from and in between. Because I think really, in my experience, playing that liaison role, letting the information, letting the evaluation, letting the subjective data of the athlete saying, this is how I feel, hold weight, is extremely valuable. If we don't allow that to play out, I mean, A, you end up in probably a whole bunch of liability in the long run, but B, the relationship with the athlete is strained, and then at the other side, the athlete coach relationship is strained, if there even is one. After that, if it's broken telephone, as opposed to this is what's going on, I'm going to interpret this as a therapist and deliver this as medical messaging to the coach, and saying my advice as the therapist in the middle here would be, he needs 3 days. If we can minimize risk in these next 3 days, he'll be much better. And that piece is massive. And then at the other side, entering the room and you're probably not there for the conversations between therapist and coach. And if you're seen as a quote unquote baby, this old guy who's banged up and can't do anything without a bunch of, fluff along the way, that's not the reality of any athlete. No athlete is coming to the room if they don't need something. No athlete is coming to ask out of practice unless they truly need it, especially at the level that you've been at and played at along the way. And, and knowing you for the small amount of time that I've known you, that's not going to be your MO. Your MO is going to be, I want to be on the floor, but I also want to be, have some longevity here. So some great points, and just not to rephrase them, but just to put them sort of from the therapist lens and look at those as very real. They need to weigh equal to what the findings are. You know what I mean? Your sensation and what you're feeling and what you're saying need to be respected, need to be understood and taken with compassion just as much as the orthopedic test. So beautiful. And again, it's not easy to put this stuff out there, and that's what this platform is about, is to educate and to network and to have athletes be heard, but also to have practitioners hear athletes, because sometimes we don't get these messages either, and we mess up, or it's our ego instead of best interest for the athlete. So I appreciate that, man. And let's kind of keep going down the line with these. It's a sport that is redundant in nature, right? You started on floor, you played on floor. Let's come back around to the point that you wanted to touch on, the not needing to work out, or that piece of sort of not having that through your travel years, right? In your 13 to 17 years, those are years that we should be spending a lot of time off the floor doing some foundational pieces, if we're looking at what makes the most sense physiologically to set somebody up for longevity. But what I've found in the amateur sports space, and correct me if I'm wrong in volleyball or if it's different, but teams and showcase teams tend to showcase their amount of time on floor. Look at all these competitions. Look at all these hours of practice that we have. This is how we're going to separate ourselves from the crowd. And there's some pieces there that may be missing with the training. I'll take you take that however you want to go with your experience.
Yeah, I think it's if big strides have been made with this, and but even a few years ago, I can't 10 years ago, when I started playing 11 years ago, there was nothing. And I was on a top team in the country for youth volleyball, high level, and we would play 17 tournaments in 1 year. And that's not even a whole year. That's just that's a fall, winter, early spring. We're playing every weekend, practicing three times a week. And that's just hardcore jumping over and over and over again. And at these tournaments at the youth level, you might play 8 matches in 1 day. And to put that in perspective, no professional international volleyball team will ever play more than maximum 2 matches in a day at the adult level, at the men's level. And to ask these kids to play 8, luckily we weren't getting that hurt as a young kids, but we're doing that without proper knowledge of, how to take care of our bodies, with prehab for the game, with stretching, with warming up properly, with anything like that. And then no strength and conditioning. And I found this past few years, because even in university, we didn't have a ton of strength and conditioning in certain situations. And really being with the beach national team, we work out hard. And that's a huge component for us. And it's almost within months of lifting hard and lifting consistently and doing the sports specific lifts, it's game changing. I walk around feeling confident that my joints are holding up, that my muscles are stabilizing, my knees and my shoulder. And that's not something we ever had and we were ever told. And it wasn't, we had this knowledge and we just didn't do it because we were lazy. You know, the only kids who did it were the ones who had parents who had knowledge in this and were kind of urging them to do it. But if you're like another kid in the program, you were just going to practice, might go on the weekend, play 8 matches and go home and not think about it because you didn't even know. We weren't told. And I think it's so important because such a high impact sport, it's put so much stress on the body. And if you're going into university already without strength and with this load throughout those years, it's tough. But yeah, like I said, I think it's come a long way. I know the youth divisions now, all the teams that I've worked with, and I do some coaching, and they're all on at least 1 day a week strength. They do online workouts now with Zoom, and it's coming along, and the information is becoming more available. But at the time, it was nothing.
Yeah, and I think that evolution is it's great to see. But it also, now that we have evolved to sort of building this into the amateur space, we also have to filter out who the experts are and where the information's coming from, because, you know, sometimes it's a matter of, and I've seen this in every sport, is like, I've played that sport, therefore I know how to train for that sport, and my credentials or my education or my background may be such that I can navigate the sport and speak the language, but the training side is sort of misunderstood. That's one example. The other is I think that, you know, we just had a couple of guests on that are out in Victoria working on an educational platform for ACL injuries. And I think the education piece is massive to get, buy-in's the wrong term, but legitimately the value of what strength and conditioning and prehab, or even just like movement preparation, like let's throw out strength with this. I don't know, there's still misconceptions as to like, if I work out, I'm going to end up bulky and I can't move, or like I'm going to end up with, you know, stunting my growth, or all these things are still out there, right, as perceptions of what strength and conditioning is. And I think they're so outdated, obviously, but getting the right information to the right people, you know, in organizations through guys like you and people who are going to go back into the younger elements and say, listen, these are the things that are important, getting that into parents' heads and coaches. Is that a part of what you're doing with where you're at in coaching? I know for you take your experience and you apply it with everybody that you work with, and I think that's absolutely critical and a must for athletes that are willing and comfortable to do that. But do you push the educational piece and making sure that good information is getting out to other coaches and parents in those younger years as well? Is that a part of what you're doing?
Absolutely. And every kid I coach, I really make sure, even if it's just for a practice and I'm not, you know, their personal coach, but if I go coach a team for practice or do a private, I really emphasize, okay, like we're warming up this way. I'll bring bands and say, hey, we're warming up the shoulder, and I'll tell them why. And I'll tell them, hey, like I'll ask them, what's your, you know, at home routine? Do you take care of yourself? And I just give them a very brief story of putting myself in their shoes and being that kid who didn't have to warm up and can jump 40 inches 100 times without warming up. And it doesn't last forever. And I thought it would. Every kid thinks it will, and it won't. So I try to just tell every youth athlete that wants to play that next level, like, do this now before it's too late, before you're playing catch up. And yeah, like it's the education. I wish if I had that, I could have been so much less pain playing volleyball. And that's all I want to share, is just help kids learn that if you take care of your body, you can have a long career and avoid what so many of us go through.
Yeah, and those are critical points. And again, therapists can preach it, coaches can preach it, but those that are living it as well, I think it really doesn't, it's not going to fall on as many deaf ears with more people saying it, but people like you who are playing at the highest level, coming back and delivering that message. I'd love to get into the injuries a little bit. I know that you go on the road with Beach and you don't have a team necessarily in your corner like we had talked about, and what that looks like and feels like, and what you have to take on in terms of independence and doing some things and learning and making sure you get the right knowledge for you personally to go and do that. But before we get there, the transition from floor or indoor to beach, not an easy one. Obviously the surface is different, the setup is different. How has that gone for you? And maybe just in terms of your body, do you feel like it's easier in some ways and more difficult in other ways, obviously, to leverage off the sand versus leveraging off a hard floor, but force absorption through the joints and stuff in the sand, and diving and not hitting your chin off a hard floor, etc. How has that transition been? I know it's been years in the making now, but do you notice a difference on your body with that?
Yeah, so throughout the years, I'd always trained both.
Mm-hmm.
In the summers, I would train beach and travel for beach, and then fall, winter, spring, I was on the hard court. And I always thought I wanted to go overseas and play pro indoor. And that was the goal. That was all I could think about. That's why I played University Volleyball near the end, and I was trying to get recruited. But as my body started breaking down and my hips couldn't handle the pounding, the landing on the hard ground anymore, it just made my decision simple. I have to get to the beach, because it's such a smaller impact, landing on the sand, moving around on the sand. It requires a different. It's more tiring, and it is different forces pushing off. But I just think, for me personally, the hips injuries that I have with the labrum tears, landing on the sand was so much less painful, and I thought that is more sustainable based on my current situation. So that's the decision I made. I don't regret it, and it's not like I wish I could just play indoor, but I'm only playing beach. It's still like equally good decision. It just wasn't my original plan.
Yeah.
But I love it, and I've always loved beach, and I it's a totally different sport, and I'm happy I'm there. But that's the reason why I chose it. It's just maybe I can play this for 10 years. Well, indoor, I thought, okay, if I go the way I am now, no matter how I kind of take care of myself, I might be 1-2 years and I'm out of there. So
yeah, an interesting biomechanics and sort of longevity, and looking at even maybe a cross study between the two. It's a same sport, different sport, all in one, and really a great take in terms of what it did to your body. Just eliminating the indoor and being able to sustain some longevity even with the injuries that you have to date. So you touched on a labral tear in the shoulder, a couple herniated discs, and 2 labrums in the hips, and just in listing those, it's almost like, yeah, okay, it's just part and parcel. It's just part of the deal of being an athlete. And I think you and I agree, like, no, like that's not the outlook. The outlook is that's a reality, but that's not part of the deal. And so, coming back around to that strength and conditioning and the education piece at the front end may have eliminated some of that, or deterred some of that, or pushed them later into your career. And also, wearing these things like a badge of honor, which I don't in any way say you're doing, but I just play through it, you're going to be fine. I just just like, here's a little like fluff massage and get back out there. Like, you now need to manage your career and your body with these things, unless you're going to shut down completely, have surgical repairs, and then a longer rehab afterwards. So these are decisions that you take in on a daily basis now, in terms of how you take care of your body, and yes, reactive in some ways, but responsive to what you're dealing with, right? Like, you manage, and you've made the transition to beach. These are not easy things to navigate outside of sport, let alone in sport. So how do you cope with these, and are those fair statements? I guess on my point, I don't mean to put words in your mouth again. I just get fired up when we talk about this stuff, and you listen to media and saying like, what a tough guy, he's playing through this and that, or she's amazing, she's playing with this, and it's like, man, like, we're subjecting ourselves to a lot of discomfort and potentially some things down the road that maybe we don't need to, if we can take care of those a little earlier, or take care of them in the moment and then sort of go from there. But the back and the hips and the shoulder, obviously critical components to volleyball, but also to longevity for your life. Where do you go with that now in terms of managing those? How do you manage those and take it wherever you want to go again?
Yeah. It's a lot of just trying not to look back at what I wish I could have done. And it's accepting, okay, I might not be the springy, explosive athlete that I once was. I might have to learn how to score different ways without hitting 100% every time to save the shoulder. I might have to devote hours of my day to rehab when other guys don't have to. And as the youngest guy in the national team for beach right now, I'm the quote unquote most broken guy. And it's hard, because they all look at me like, what's wrong? Like, why are you're so young? Like, how are you still so injured? And it does take a toll, but I'm just happy knowing that I'm still able to play the sport. I'm not to a point where I can't play the sport. And I've had such a good team around me now that has really encouraged me to say, hey, like, your injuries don't define you. That MRI report that showed labral tear in each hip with an impingement in each hip with 2 herniated discs in your back and a torn shoulder, like, on paper, it looks like, yeah, obviously this guy's never going to play again. But in reality, hey, like, I'm practicing right now every day, almost pain-free. Mm-hmm. So it just shows, and I didn't think when I first got those results, I was in a ton of pain. I couldn't jump. I couldn't even run and change direction. So it's easy to think you're in pain, you can't do the things, you get that result, and you can be convinced or convince yourself that it's done. But having a team around you that can, you trust, and you really believe that the words they're saying are true, where, hey, like, you can recover from this. Other guys recover from this. Here's how. Like, it might take you way more work, but you can do it. Your career is not over. And even a huge inspiration for me was Josh Binstock. I don't know if you know the name. Two-time beach volleyball Olympian for Canada at the last 2 Olympics. And he had similar hip issues, and he had the same shoulder injury. And so I reached out to him after I got those results and said, hey, Josh, like, pretty down right now, had these results, can't really play. And he was just like, dude, never say that again. Like, that thought's gone out of your head. Like, you will be playing, like, you will be fighting for an Olympic spot in 4 years. And that just set a fire under me. Like, okay, like, I could have every part of my body injured, but I'm not going to give up until I have to. And I don't want to at all. So
yeah, I think, working diagnosis or definitive, quote unquote, definitive diagnoses from imaging, right? Like, this is a whole nother world of, when we get these, it's like, there's a bit of relief. Okay. Like, I'm not making all this stuff up in my head, but at the same time, like, these are significant injuries. They're showing up on imaging, which therefore can define me, or we can work around them, or we go and get surgery and fix them. And that's the mentality of a lot of athletes. It's the mentality of a lot of practitioners. That's the mentality of a lot of surgeons as well. It's like, well, just do the surgery and then you'll be better. But there's a whole lot that goes on when you change natural anatomy. So if you can work with the anatomy, work with the injury, and find a team that can, help you manage you, as opposed to manage you for you. I think that makes a difference too. And I know some of the people that you work with, and have had some overlap with a few of them, and really, really great team. And you don't need to name names. You don't need to do any of that if you don't feel comfortable. But I think this idea of empowering the athlete to feel like they have control, like you have understanding of the injuries, and know that, yeah, they may get a little bit worse, but there's a ton that I can do in this body with these injuries, and work around them and work with them, maybe not even around them, but work with those injuries to work in your space and to play. Because surgical repairs, as I've said numerous times through this podcast and beyond, is, they fix the tissue, but they don't necessarily fix the issue that caused that. And to have impingement and labral tears after playing a sport that requires impinged hips and labral tears in a lot of cases, to go and have surgery may not actually cure anything other than the tissue that shows up injured on the image. So a long-winded sort of version and take on that. But I absolutely love the fact that you reached out. Also, like, you reached out to somebody who's had those injuries, those images, somebody who's won world championships, somebody who's been there. And that's what this platform is all about, right? Like, showcasing your story so that practitioners, athletes, coaches, younger athletes, moms, dads, uncles, cousins, whoever it is, can hear this and say, man, that resonates with me. I'm going through something in my life. And maybe it is just as simple as hearing a top level youngest athlete on the beach volleyball, national program team here saying, I reached out for help, because that's massive too, to reach out for help when you need it. And again, I really appreciate this because there is so much strength in vulnerability, whether you admit it or not, or I'm acknowledging it for you. I think this goes such a long way, and to treat and to know yourself first. So let's take it down that road. In beach, you don't have a team. Indoor, typically there's a therapist, whatever their designation, they're on the bench and they'll take care of things that are happening in the moment. And maybe there's a team in the clinic. But on the beach, you've been playing 6 years internationally with beach, right? And traveling, and you go, and that's it. You have some bands, maybe. What do you take in your self-care kit, and sort of how do you front load that self-care kit? Who do you talk to? Maybe not personal name unless you're comfortable doing that. And what's important for you to understand before you go out on the road?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest part, which can help anyone traveling and on a team even, is just the point you made about understanding your body and the injuries, and really understanding, okay, why it's hurting and what supporting things might be weak and what can I work on that isn't surgery and things like that. And that was game changing for me, because being on an indoor team with the whole staff, like you're talking about, you go to them with an injury, they're just patching you up with, okay, we're going to massage, we're going to tape, we're going to do all this thing, but they're not teaching you, or in my case, they weren't teaching, why am I injured? What do I need to strengthen to not be injured? It's more just repair, like instant fixes, band-aids to just get me through that next day. And that's how I went for my whole university career. But the second I started learning, okay, like this injury, what's causing it? What can I do what can I activate to make it feel better? What can I do every night at home when I'm not at the physio clinic? That's when I started actually seeing improvement. And so that's what you learn. Okay, I take on the road, there's no trainer. So I need to know, one, with the trainers, what exercises to be doing. I'm not going to see a physiotherapist to get a massage. I'm going to say, hey, teach me. Like, I want to learn. It's like, give me your knowledge so I can take it back and know how to do it myself when you're not there. So that's why I take notes, I write down diagrams, I have a whole journal with my injuries and all the different things I've learned and have helped, not helped, which is more effective, not effective. So it's like a little guide for me with all the different things I have. And then I bring every band possible, even for injuries I might not have yet, but could happen. So anything for my knees, lacrosse balls to roll up my back, exercises for everything, for core stabilization, for shoulder work, for the hips, the knees, even if I roll an ankle, like I can do. And it's just having everything possible, because sometimes you might be on the road for a month, 2 months at a time, and you got to be prepared for everything. And you might not have access to a gym. So you should have everything you can that fits in a suitcase to keep you at least maintaining your fitness level, rather than losing or not doing anything. I find that happens so often too with younger athletes. They'll go with their team to do the strength and conditioning at the practices and stuff, but then when they hit the road individually, like on the beach, they don't actually know how to take care of themselves, and they're lost, and they'll just get caught up in the moment of traveling and forget to do their rehab, and all of a sudden tournament starts and they're getting hurt. And that's what we want to avoid.
Yeah, and I think that's mutual in terms of my career. And reflecting back, I have been the therapist who created a bit of dependence in athletes, to lean on, you must come see me, I have the all-knowing. And that's not the case. And it wasn't the case at the time, but maybe I didn't know as much, or maybe I didn't understand the perception or how the information was being received. But in fact, turning that on its head and empowering an athlete to understand so they can take it away and take the driver's controls for their career, for their longevity. And when they walk away or out on their own for a travel tournament, they can reach back and say, like, hey, quick update, or like, quick reminder, I just need to go over this one more time. Because you're right, the adherence to programming, a large percentage of that depends on being in the environment with the coach or with the therapist. And I think if we can flip that a little bit, I'm a better therapist if my athletes that I work with can walk out of the room and know what to do and not come back to see me, or come back to see me fewer times, and not depend on those sessions to quote unquote get them better, but they rely on themselves to get themselves better by understanding. So some really great points here. And again, session 75 with Chris Towe, who's part of the NextGen Beach Volleyball program with Volleyball Canada. It is National Athletic Therapy Month. And again, this is an athletic therapy podcast. Happy Athletic Therapy Month to everybody out there. Chris, your time is valuable. I know we've pushed this a couple times, and again, to have you here and to listen to this story and have you share it to this depth goes such a long way for myself personally to get to know you a little bit better. But to share this out to other athletes and therapists and practitioners in the space. critical. I think that's what all this is about. So what's coming up next on your schedule in terms of competition? I know you went through, a bout of COVID, and there's been some things going back and forth in terms of your training partners or people that you're around at least. So it slowed things down, as well as, rules and regulations surrounding COVID. Where does the competition schedule stand for you? What's upcoming, so people can sort of follow that path?
Yeah, for sure. COVID took a toll on the World Beach Volleyball Tour, as last year there weren't many events, and this year they finally started picking up again. But as the last 6 years playing University of Volleyball, I haven't amassed a ton of points yet, and having to take this last year off, the points I did have disappeared. So I'm kind of back at the starting block, looking to get into anything I can. Maybe later in July, August, hopefully travel over to Bulgaria, maybe Czech Republic for a couple tournaments.
Yeah, beautiful.
Ideally, it's tough when it's an Olympic year. Tournaments are all packed and things like that. But yeah, going after this season into next season, that's when the start of the next cycle begins, and that's when tournaments will really pick up and points will start to matter. And that's kind of my goal right now, is to just put myself in the best situation, technically, but also physically for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe a little bit more time to understand and create programming that can get you to that next level if and when, let's say when those opportunities arise. Amazing, an amazing opportunity to be part of, Volleyball Canada, and you have the jacket on or the hoodie on, and what a prideful thing to be able to wear, to wear a flag, to compete at that level. And hopefully we'll see you on the tour sooner than later. And yes, all of the things COVID will back things up, but we'll see you back out there again, and some extra time for you to recoup and recover. Just one last sort of topic, I guess, before I let you run. I know we're running here on, a little longer than anticipated, but so much good stuff here to talk about and dive into. Characteristics that you've found to be beneficial from a therapy standpoint or performance personnel. What's worked in relationships with you and teams that you've been on, and what hasn't worked? Those are always sort of takeaways for people listening.
Yeah. So what works the best for me is, and I think every athlete, is just that trust in that therapist working to get to know you on a personal level and how your mind works around injury and practice. And every single athlete's different, and every way they respond to injury is different, and the amount of attention. Some might need, hey, like, we'll meet once and I'll give you the exercises, and I trust that, I know you're going to go do them and never come back in a month and let's see. But other guys who are less experienced, like the younger guys, might need constant reminders of why it's important, the explanations. And I think early on, when I got an exercise prescribed, but also explained exactly why it's prescribed and what muscles it's using and why I need it and why over time this is going to help me heal, it was so much more enticing for me to want to go do that exercise, rather than here's a sheet, do these, come back, get a massage 3 times a week. Like, it was more of like, hey, like, we're going to figure out this problem together. Hey, tell me exactly how you're feeling, rather than, oh, you have a knee problem, let me do this standard treatment, rather than like treating every situation uniquely. Was for me amazing when therapists and trainers do that. It's like, okay, like, we're going to figure out this problem. You have pain here. Let's look at what you're doing every single day. Let's look at what you're doing in the gym and in practice, and let's battle this in every aspect of your life. And when you build that relationship and you're working together and communicating back and forth, even like, hey, like, I'll text my trainer, hey, like, I did this today and it felt great, or this didn't feel so good. And it's like, okay, let's switch it up. And having that dialogue, rather than just a non-informed prescription of exercises or whatever. That's what has made me learn so much. That's what I feel comfortable when I talk to younger athletes and they say my shoulder hurts. I can almost say like, hey, try all these things, or hey, like, go see these people, rather than, I don't know, a lot of athletes don't know. They just do the things. They don't know why they're doing it. And having a therapist just explain why and how teach almost is, I think that's, for me, was the biggest help and the most attractive characteristic.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you capturing that sort of on the spot. And to wrap this up, because so much to take away from this conversation. And again, really appreciate you making the time here and sharing this with us, those that are here live, those that are picking this up on podcast. It goes such a long way. This is session 75. Chris Towe. Let's chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Trust, rapport, communication, consistency. This truly an ace. Appreciate it. Have a good night, and I'll let you wrap this one up with whatever you so choose to close it out with. We'll go again Sunday night. We're back on track. Another volleyball athlete, and our June guests will be published through our new Instagram handle at letschat.at on Instagram. Check us out there. Check us out on all of the podcast hubs that you follow. Chris Towe, we'll let you close this one up.
Yeah, thanks, James. Thanks for having me. And my last word or message to all athletes out there listening, or therapists, is just for the athletes, really take care of taking ownership of your injuries, advocating for yourselves. Even if someone tells you, hey, like, this is the right thing, question it if you're unsure. If you have that gut feeling that maybe you shouldn't go on the court, even though you're told that's okay, question it and follow that gut feeling and get a second opinion. Or, don't always hop on the floor because you're told. Take care of yourself, because in the long run it pays off. Invest in yourself, advocate for yourself, learn as much as you can about the body, be a injury professional, and then you won't have any problems.
Beautiful. Well said. Follow your intuition, and it may just lead you to a sunny beach somewhere. Appreciate it, man. Have a great night, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this community. Check us out online, firststartherapy.com. That's FIRSTAR therapy.com. Or email us with feedback, consult@firststartherapy.com. CONSULT@firststartherapy.com. On Instagram @firststar.therapy, and our podcast host @letschat.at. This is First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast.